Ugh, you said you were over him, but his hoodie is stealing your rotation. It's time. Grab your phone, snap a few pics, and sell it on Depop. Listed in minutes, with no selling fees. And just like that, a guy 500 miles away just paid full price for your closure. And right on cue.
Hey, still got my hoodie?
Nope, but I've got tonight's dinner paid for. Start selling on Depop, where taste recognizes taste. List now with no selling fees. Payment processing fees and boosting fees still apply. See website for details.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get him a zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome to the Stone Zone. We're about to dive into the deep end. This April 15th, you will be able to get your own U.S. mint-issued $1 gold coin with the image of President Donald Trump. Later in the show, the Treasurer of the United States of America, Brandon Beach, joins us to talk about plans to roll out this coin. This will be legal tender. Very excited about this. Today, a story in the UK Daily Mail says that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is moving up on Vice President JD Vance as a potential presidential candidate in 2028. Now, presidential politics is something I know a little bit about. I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, serving on senior levels in the campaigns of President Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, serving in junior levels in the presidential campaigns of Richard Milhouse Nixon. The Republican Party is about hegemony. We believe in the natural order of things. JD Vance, just the fact that he's a very successful sitting vice president, has a big leg up in any future contest for the presidency. Now, it is true that Marco Rubio, who I have supported in all of his U.S. Senate campaigns, including the one in which he challenged Democrat, Republican turned independent turned Democrat Charlie Crist, has a job that, on the one hand, gets one more publicity. He's obviously in the forefront of our efforts in Venezuela and Iran, and has, I think, done a spectacular job of implementing the policies of President Donald Trump, whereas the Vice President of the United States, by nature, is in a position where he rarely gets the spotlight. JD Vance is incredibly effective, but he's effective behind the scenes. I can tell you that I don't think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard, for example, would have been confirmed by the U.S. Senate for their important positions without the effective maneuvering backstage by J.D. Vance. He's also very articulate. Now, cutting against that claim is a new poll out from St. Anselm's College in New Hampshire that showed J.D. Vance at 46 and Marco Rubio at 27. Interesting, but also reflecting all of the other polling to date. The St. Anselm poll, very respected in the Granite State, by the way, but this is not the first poll that shows J.D. Vance with almost a 2-to-1 lead over Marco Rubio. It also assumes, by the way, that there'll be no other candidates. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, whose multi-million-dollar campaign was an ignominious failure when he challenged the man who made him governor, Donald Trump, in the last presidential campaign, says that he might run again. That's a little hard to understand. I'm not sure where he would raise the money to run, first of all, because no one gave money to Ron DeSantis because they liked him. People gave him money because he was the governor of Florida. He essentially extorted that money. And, of course, he will no longer be governor in 2028. And then secondarily, Iowa, the first contest, really puts a premium on retail politics. In other words, the voters of Iowa, in preparation for their caucuses, they want you to sit at their kitchen table and drink coffee. They want you to spend hours in endless forums in retail campaigning. Ron DeSantis is a man who never looks you in the eye, never gives you a firm handshake, never says thank you. He was famous for wearing earbuds, not because he was listening to anything, but because he could use them to avoid human contact. So I don't, and all the polls, by the way, show him, despite the fact that he spent millions of dollars just a year and some months ago running for president, still in all of these polls, he's in single digits. And of course, Tulsi Gabbard is a wild card, Democrat turned Republican. I have said on many occasions I think she will someday be president. Stand by that. It doesn't necessarily mean 2028, but sometimes you become vice president by running for president. That, of course, is the story of George H.W. Bush. So I tend to discount many of these early stories. I think JD Vance is still a heavy favorite. On the other hand, Republicans better focus on the 2026 elections before getting all wrapped up about the 2028 elections. We could be in a situation like we were in with Reagan. In 1980, Reagan gave us up until that time the largest tax cut in American history, and those tax cuts did not have the beneficial effect on the economy by 1982. They were passed in 1981, but by 1984 you had a roaring economy. The Trump economy was off to a very good start. The war obviously has caused some increase in gasoline prices. I expect that to be temporary. John Catsimatidis, who owns United Refining, knows a lot about that industry, a media mogul. I saw a great interview with him the other day. He said that he believes this increase in oil prices is temporary. I completely agree with him. So by 1984, I should say by 2028, I think there's a strong chance that we will have a boom economy, giving an advantage to any Republican candidate for president. Also yesterday, President Donald Trump announced that he will not be attending the Conservative Political Action Conference. I believe it's the first time since 2011 that has been the case. I was actually working for him then. I was the one who explained to him what CPAC was and engineered his invitation to the first CPAC conference in Washington, D.C. The president says he's not going because some of the speakers he believes have been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party. I believe he's talking about Steve Bannon, who has recently been exposed in the emails released by the Department of Justice as being an accomplice and advising Jeffrey Epstein on his public rehabilitations. It's the same Steve Bannon, by the way, who pled guilty in New York State to embezzling $15 million from the Build the Wall Foundation. Strangely enough, pled guilty but received no jail time. Also named in a $1 billion fraud case as an unindicted co-conspirator. It's interesting to me that when Bannon's latter-day financial patron, a Chinese national named Miles Guo, was sued in New York State on federal fraud charges, he was asked multiple times whether his money came from the CCP, money that flowed through to Steve Bannon and his war room, and he pled the fifth 55 times in that trial, specifically when he was asked about a man named William J.E., who is another Chinese national who worked very closely with both Bannon and Miles Guo. The records from that trial show that Bannon and G spoke by phone over 194 times in a 12-month period. G is identified both publicly and privately as a member of the Communist Chinese Party, actually an official in the party. So I think this is what the president was talking about. CPAC just doesn't have the punch it used to have, and now with the president not attending and Steve Bannon as your headliner, I predict they're going to have very serious problems with ticket sales. There's also a striking turnaround today at major U.S. airports, and it's raising eyebrows in Washington. After many days of chaos, the TSA lines, which were stretching for hours during the ongoing government shutdown, have suddenly improved at, for example, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. Wait times dropped dramatically almost overnight. The key difference is that ICE agents have stepped in to back up those TSA agents who have chosen to stay on the job, despite the fact that the Senate minority of Democrats refuse to move legislation to finance ICE. All of those doomsday reports we heard from liberals, Hakeem Jeffries, the House minority yesterday, saying ICE agents would kill travelers in airports. That's overheated rhetoric, if I've ever heard any. Federal officials deployed ICE agents to more than a dozen airports yesterday to assist with crowd control and ID checks as TSA staffing shortages started to worsen. The results were shorter lines, smoother operations, and far less frustration for travelers. Over the weekend, some passengers waited for more than 4 hours to get through security. Now, I'm happy to say, lines are moving quickly, and the contrast is hard to ignore. But, of course, not everyone is happy. Union leaders representing TSA workers are criticizing the move, claiming that ICE agents lack specialized training and shouldn't be involved in airport operations, as if TSA are brain surgeons or rocket scientists rather than glorified mall cops. They argue Congress should focus on funding the agency instead because they don't want their payola to run out. But Americans are seeing a real-world example of leadership taking action. President Donald Trump, a problem solver, used his executive power to solve a problem. By the way, Tom Homan, the head of ICE, made it very clear that ICE agents were still in a secondary role at the airport, that it was still TSA agents responsible for the principal screening. All of these government goons zapping us with radiation and patting down our private parts really needed to keep us safe. This is what we should be asking ourselves about TSA and all levels of government amidst the shutdown crisis. If they're not absolutely necessary, well, I think they should go permanently. Now, the former head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, didn't accomplish much. There will be multiple investigations into her relationship with one Corey Lewandowski, who was technically not a government employee, but according to information that has now been widely published, was heavily involved in the contracting process at DHA. But the key thing to remember is, if Kristi Noem accomplished nothing else, we no longer have to take off our shoes when we go through TSA. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a very, one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate those warm words from Vice President JD Vance. I wish everyone in the Republican Party had his level of courage. In a stunning act of political cowardice, the Senate Republicans are now acquiescing to a deal that would fund the Department of Homeland Security while abandoning key immigration enforcement in order to reopen the shutdown. After more than 5 weeks of a partial government shutdown, Republican lawmakers are floating a plan that would fund most DHS operations, but deliberately leave ICE enforcement and removal programs out of the deal. That means fewer deportations and weaker border enforcement. This is the exact strategy Democrats have pushed for years, creating a crisis in an attempt to protect their vaunted illegal alien voting demographic. And now, some Republicans, out of craven weakness, are actually embracing it. Behind closed doors, Republican leaders admit they're giving Democrats what they want in hopes of ending the shutdown. They claim it's a tactical move, but it's obviously surrender, and that fact will not be lost on prospective midterm voters. The proposal would still fund investigations into cartels, traffickers, and criminals, but without enforcement and removal, it guts the very backbone of immigration law. At a time when Americans are demanding secure borders, as every poll shows mass deportations are overwhelmingly popular with the public, this plan does the exact opposite. Even worse, the deal hasn't been coordinated with House Republicans, showing that it will be thrust on them and put them in a no-win situation. Some senators are trying to quietly sideline stronger election security measures and border provisions, pushing them off until later. Another sign of lack of backbone. Republican elected officials are yet again listening to their special interest masters rather than following the lead of the greatest president in my lifetime, Donald Trump, as well as the will of the American voters. This is all the more reason why we have to get out there and get active, and that you need to be very careful in the candidates that you select in the upcoming primaries, be you a Republican or a Democrat. Until we get a Republican Party that is not more concerned with re-election and more concerned about making America great again, the country will not be saved. Meanwhile, more Russiagate treachery has been exposed, but my question is an obvious one. With the passing of Robert Mueller, a man who prosecuted me despite a paucity of evidence, a man who was forced to admit in his long-hidden, long-redacted final report that he'd actually found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part, something that was concealed to me and my defense lawyers for 18 months. Why has no one been brought to account? See, the Democrats say it's about retaliation or revenge, when in fact it's about accountability and justice. The Russian collusion hoax was the greatest single dirty trick, the greatest single abuse of government power in American history. And thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, we know exactly who was responsible, but none of them have yet been brought to account. None of them have yet been charged. It is an outrage. Don't go away. Coming up, the U.S. Treasurer of the United States, Brandon Beach, joins us to talk about the gold Trump coin that is moving forward and will be available to the American public from the U.S. Mint on April 15th. I want to get the backstory behind that. I'm very excited to have my Trump coin. How limited they're going to be, I don't know, but the Commission on Fine Arts last week approved a 24-karat gold coin bearing President Trump's likeness to celebrate America's 250th birthday. We'll be right back to talk all about it.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Joining me now is the Treasurer of the United States, Brandon Beach. Talk about an exciting story that I read in the New York Post, and that is that the U.S. Mint is moving forward with a gold commemorative coin featuring President Donald Trump's image, which I believe will be issued by the Mint in April, if I am correct. Now, this is breaking with tradition. Traditionally, we have not featured sitting presidents on our money. But I can't think of a more deserving or emblematic symbol for America and liberty than President Donald Trump. So, Treasurer Brandon Beach, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Well, Roger, thank you for having me on the Stone Zone. And before we talk about the dollar coin and President Trump's accomplishments, I first want to just thank you for your service to our country from the Nixon administration, Reagan administration, and now in the Trump administration for advancing President Trump's America First agenda. So thank you for what you've done and continue to do to make America great. You know, we are doing this. Kind. Well, we are doing this. Well, thank you. We are doing this Trump dollar coin, and I want to tell you, April 15th, we will produce 2 million of them. And these will be legal tender. This will be a dollar coin that you can go and spend at a convenience store or a coffee shop and buy a cup of coffee with. It will be a dollar legal tender coin with President Trump on it. Again, we're going to produce it. It'll be gold. And it will be, like I said, done April 15th. We'll produce about 2 million of them first and get them out. And we're going to get them out to the public as soon as we can so that you can use them to spend money on and spend it and use it just like a dollar bill, but it'll be a dollar coin. The Circulating Coin Redesign Act of 2020 allowed us to do this. And you do not have to be deceased to be on a coin. Now, on paper currency, you have to be deceased. Now, there is a bill in Chairman French Hill's committee to do, I want to do a $250 bill with President Trump on it, but I have to get Congress to approve that. It's H.R. 1761, and right now it got out of Andy Barr's subcommittee, and now it's in French Hill's committee. If we can get it out, then it'll go to rules and then to the House floor and then over to the Senate. That's going to be a little heavier lift, but I think we're still going to get there on that. And I mentioned that to him when he appointed me to this job. I wanted to put him on a $250 bill for our 250-year birthday celebration. And at the time, I didn't know you had to be deceased to be on money, so we decided to go ahead and try to get a bill passed, and that's in the works. The other coin we're going to have is another coin that's going to be 24-karat gold. It's going to be 3 inches in diameter. And it's going to have the dollar coin will have his picture on it, his headshot. On the 3-inch coin, we're going to produce 47 of those, and they may run in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. And it's got him standing behind a desk, and it's going to be a really nice coin for coin collectors and for people that just love President Trump. And we'll do more of them if the demand exceeds 47. So we got some really nice things happening for the president, and nobody's more deserving than President Trump.
Yeah, I can hear liberal heads exploding across the country at this very instant. But I salute you for your courage, and I completely agree with your conclusion. On the other hand, I thought you said how many of the initial coin will be issued?
Well, on the 15th, we're going to produce 2 million. And then we will get those out and then come back and produce more. And they'll be being produced on an ongoing basis, just like we do nickels, dimes, and quarters. We will produce them as needed and getting them out to, the retailers. And when they need more, we'll produce more.
I would think that many Americans will get that coin and hold on to it in perpetuity because we will never see a president again like this one. I've worked for 4 presidents, but there is no one like Donald Trump. One thing I did want to ask you about, because we talked about this previously, it was under this administration and your leadership at the Treasury Department that we did away with the penny. We no longer have the penny. Sorry, Abe. Tell us a little bit about the decision to end production of the penny. And we did a great thing for the taxpayers with that very last penny, as I recall.
This is part of President Trump's common sense agenda, Roger. He saw what was going on. Pre-COVID, we did about 10 billion pennies a year we produced. Last year, we produced less than 2 billion, but the cost went from 1 penny to 4.5 cents. And that's just not common sense, and that's not in President Trump's common sense agenda. So we are going to save the taxpayers $56 million annually by eliminating the penny. Now, the good news is I was fortunate enough to strike the last penny in Philadelphia, And I held it up, and we struck it, and then held it up, and then I signed the authenticity papers. And for 2 weeks, we auctioned it off, and we thought we were going to get $5 million for it. We ended up selling it for $16.7 million for that last penny. So that also goes into Treasury to help reduce the national debt. But it just made common sense to get rid of the penny. There are $300 billion in circulation, and so we hopefully won't run out of them immediately, but we are seeing some Walmart and McDonald's and some other retailers having trouble getting their hands on pennies. So I don't know if people are hoarding them or what, but it was something that needed to be done, and there's no need for a penny anymore. Again, sorry, Abe, but it was time to go.
So going back to this 24-karat gold coin that's going to be issued to commemorate America's 250th anniversary, how was the image of President Trump that will appear on the coin selected?
Well, we went through several proofs and prototypes, and he looked at them. Secretary Besant looked at them. I looked at them, and we came up with several, and then we picked what we thought looked best and what he would like. And listen, there's nobody more deserving to be on this coin than President Donald J. Trump. I can tell you, when you look at what he's done just this term, from day one, President Trump hit the ground running with executive orders, the tariffs that he and Secretary Besant implemented to get more manufacturing jobs back and even the playing field. And then really the one thing that was really big that President Trump led on was the One Big Beautiful Bill. And he laid the foundation in 2025, and I think we're going to see the fruits of that labor in 2026. And I'm really bullish and optimistic about 2026. And here's why. Number one, it's our 250th birthday. We're going to be talking about American exceptionalism, American pride, American spirit, American success stories, people that have been successful, like a Jeff Sprecher that came to Atlanta with $1,000, started in Intercontinental Exchange. Now he owns a New York Stock Exchange and several other exchanges and is a multi-billionaire. That only happens in America. Another example is from my home state of Louisiana. You look at Todd Graves, couldn't get a loan to open up a restaurant, went and worked on an oil rig for a couple years, saved $50,000. Now he owns Raising Cane's and he's worth $22 billion. That only happens in America. So we're going to talk about that. The other thing we've got going, we got the FIFA World Cup coming that's going to showcase our country to the world and really help from an economic development standpoint. And then, as I mentioned, the One Big Beautiful Bill, when you look at what's kicking in now, I was at a restaurant the other night up here in D.C., and I asked the waiter, I said, have you done your taxes yet? He said, yes, and I got $7,500 more cash back in my pockets because I didn't have to pay tax on tips. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. So I think you're going to see money flowing. The next thing I think that's going to really help is we have a new Fed chair, and I would see interest rates going down so that young people can afford to buy a house. And I know right now we're going through a tough time on oil prices, but I think once we conclude this Iran war and we not only become energy independent, we become energy dominant, I think you'll see $2 a gallon gas in the near future. And then you top that with GDPs at 4.4, I believe it'll go to 5.0. And then since President Trump's been in office again in the second term, we've had over 53 record days on Wall Street. And the Dow hit 50,000 for the first time a month ago. So when you add all that together, I think we're going to have a booming economy. And this will be a stark contrast with what's going on in New York City, capitalism versus socialism. And I'll take capitalism all day, and that's what President Trump believes in, too. So I'm really looking forward to 2026. I think we're going to have a booming economy, and there's nobody that knows how to really take an economy and really get it going than President Trump. He did in his first term before COVID, and now he's inherited a mess from the previous administration. Look what we've done already as far as the economy, and I'm really feeling good about where we're at. And it just proves, Roger, leadership matters, elections matter, and elections have consequences. And, thank goodness President Trump got reelected.
I'm in total agreement with you. I can't stand these panicans who are ready to throw in the towel on 2026. They don't understand, first of all, how volatile our politics are. They don't understand how rock solid the president's base is. You don't see the kind of weakness in the base that Jimmy Carter had, brought on the challenge from Ted Kennedy, the kind of weakness that Gerald Ford had, brought on the challenge by Ronald Reagan. I've never seen the party more united. You wouldn't know this when you go to social media and you see all these so-called influencers bickering with each other, but the Trump voter is very solid. Not just talking just about Republicans, but also independents and a small number of Democrats who are Trump first. And there's no erosion in that support, despite the constant attacks of the fake news media. One thing I want to get at that's hard to quantify. I've known the president for 50 years. You know him well. I try to tell people that the Trump you see in public is exactly like the Trump you see in private. In other words, like politicians, he doesn't have two faces. He only has one face. There is only one Trump. He is one of the funniest, most entertaining, most decent, most thoughtful people I've ever known. But people don't really believe it. They think that it's some kind of act. Tell people, since you've spent a lot of time with the president, you've opened for him in, I think, 17 rallies in his amazing comeback. What's the president really like?
Well, to your point, Roger, I was fortunate to be part of President Trump's campaign and really go backstage. And when you go backstage, you get to really see behind the curtain. And it didn't take me long to figure out, one, President Trump, he loves our country. He wants America to be first. We want to beat China. We want to beat Russia. We want to win. We want the USA to be the best, number one. Number two, President Trump loves his family. You know, you look at President Trump's children. They all work. They're all successful. You don't see him in any kind of trouble. He is tough on his family. He loves his family. The other thing I will tell you, backstage, President Trump always had either 30 to 35 law enforcement, military, or first responders back there, and he was thanking them. He took pictures with them, and he didn't publicize it. But it made me realize real quick, President Trump loves, respects law enforcement and the military. But I will tell you what President Trump really loves, and that's capitalism. He wants you, your kids, your grandkids to have the opportunity to pursue the American dream. And President Trump realizes government doesn't create jobs. The private sector creates jobs. But what he does realize is that government can create this conducive environment through, tariffs and fair trade, low taxes, less regulation, an educated workforce, and infrastructure investment, both roads, bridges, and 21st century infrastructure. He knows we've got to win this AI war. There's not going to be a first and a second place finisher. There's going to be just one winner, and we need to win. And if we do those things and get out of the way, the private sector will flourish. And to your point, Roger, he cares about people. Every time I see him, he asks about my daughter and my son. How's your son's golf game? How's your daughter doing? He's just unbelievable, all the people he meets and how good he is about that. But I will tell you, the president does have that ability. You talk to his Secret Service agents, they'll tell you he cares about them and ask about their family. And not many presidents do that. So he's one of a kind. I'm not sure we'll ever see another president like President Trump.
I could not agree more. We're going to have to wrap it there. I want to thank the Treasurer of the United States of America, Brandon Beach, both for his leadership in making the 24-karat gold coin to commemorate America's 250th birthday with President Trump's visage on it a reality in April, but also for his leadership to make America great again. Mr. Treasurer,
Roger,
thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Take care.
God bless you, my friend.
All
right, you're listening to The Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. We'll be right back with more politics on the other side.
This is The Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's The Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And you're back for the final segment of the Stone Zone. Somewhat ironic that in the same week that former FBI Director and Special Counsel Robert Mueller passes, that newly classified documents are raising even more concerns about government treachery during the Russia-Gate investigation. According to recently released reports, former Trump campaign advisor Walid Phares was secretly spied on by the FBI for nearly a year, despite the fact that investigators found no evidence whatsoever of wrongdoing. The surveillance conducted under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that's FISA, reportedly continued even after agents concluded that Phares was honest and had no ties to any criminal activity or any Russian collusion. An FBI agent involved in the case testified that nothing collected during these wiretaps advanced the investigation, other than confirming that Phares had told the truth. Critically, the FBI is accused of withholding exculpatory evidence from the secret FISA court, information that would have prevented or halted this illegal spying. This mirrors exactly what happened to my colleague Carter Page, and very sadly, what happened to me. During the investigation that the Mueller witch hunt focused on me, prosecutors told two federal judges that they had evidence of probable cause, I guess you'd say, charging me with treason, a conspiracy against the United States, counterfeiting, a wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, as well as numerous other crimes. Of course, after they got into my electronic records, my emails, my text messages, they found that they had no evidence whatsoever of any of those crimes. It was then that one of the prosecutors, Aaron Zelinsky, by the way, all the prosecutors in my case previously worked for Hillary Clinton, tried to pressure a young field man who was working in the Trump campaign into visiting me in South Florida and wearing a wire in a ham-handed attempt to entrap me in some way. Fortunately for me, this individual refused, but it shows the depths to which they would go in order to destroy those who supported the president. In my case, I think most people understand. In order to violate the False Statements Act, in other words, to lie under oath before Congress, one has to have motive and it has to be material. There was no Russian collusion to lie about. So when the judge said to me at sentencing, "You have been convicted of lying to cover up for Donald Trump," I say, cover up exactly what? Very clever the way that the Mueller prosecutors judge shop to get Judge Amy Berman Jackson. They claimed, and they brought a case against 17 Russians, claiming that they had hacked the Democrat National Committee, a case that never went to discovery and never went to trial. They claimed that my case was related to that case, yet in my trial, they wouldn't let me present forensic evidence or expert testimony to prove that there was no hack of the Democrat National Committee. The prosecutors promised that they would produce evidence against me that was gleaned from search warrants in that other case. Of course, they never did, because it didn't exist. I thank God Almighty. It is only through the grace of God that I'm with you here today, and the fact that Donald Trump saw very clearly that I was being prosecuted not because I did something wrong, but because I refused to testify falsely against him. I would not bear false witness against him. And that is the true story of the Mueller investigation. So when people say, oh, Trump was harsh when he said he was glad that Mueller was dead, how harsh was it when FBI agents raided my home, 29 of them at 6 o'clock in the morning, and perp walked my 73-year-old wife, who's virtually deaf, out into the street for the CNN cameras? I would say that that was harsh. That's right, you heard it here in the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.